pro wrestling is an ever-evolving industry, with encyclopedias being updated, documentaries being released, and relationships mended or destroyed. The attitudes and narratives of wrestling superstars begin to change. Individuals like the Ultimate Warrior, Bruno Sammartino, and others are brought back into prominence, while the history of some of the other bright characters are being washed away or changed. Some are pigeonholed and being remembered for that one event or that one specific moment in time. Others become as insignificant as a crossword answer. My job as PWP's resident historian is to remind you of the impact that these individuals and teams left on the industry. This is PW Profiles. Now, Anthony,
Logan.
when you think of the larger-than-life professional wrestlers, you know, your John Cena's, your The Rock's, Undertaker's, Hulk Hogan's, who do you think was the first larger-than-life wrestler or sports entertainer?
You gotta think of your Ric Flairs, your Dusties.
Before that,
your Bobo Brazils. We just talked about
even a little bit before that.
Well, Abraham Lincoln. He was a wrestler.
Well, okay, after Lincoln, the name I'm looking for is Gorgeous George.
Oh, the name from the old WWE intros.
Yes, yep.
Way before Andre the Giant.
Yeah, I would say Gorgeous George, he was good in the ring, but he was the first one that had a gimmick. He was gorgeous. He had locks of hair that were golden. He came out with golden bobby pins, large robes. Came out to the song Pomp and Circumstance, which is associated with graduations and with Macho Man Randy Savage.
I did not know that.
He was the first one to come out to it. The pins he had were called Georgie pins, and he'd throw them to the audience, which a lot of the audience would throw back. He had perfume, which instead of it being Chanel number 5 was Chanel number 10, because he would say, "Why be half safe?" And before the official could check him for foreign objects, as an official would, he would make sure that the official had gloves on, and he would tell him to get your filthy hands off me. So, as I said, he was the first to have a real character, because at this time, it was mostly, you know, guy A versus guy B. Guy A's from Texas, guy B's from California. One was a football player, one was an amateur wrestler. While Gorgeous George would carry a silver mirror, he'd have rose petals spread at his feet. He became a national celebrity. People compared him to Lucille Ball and Bob Hope. George was featured on postcards, and it was just crazy, the fanfare for such a heelish character. Like, I know a lot of times you want the heel to be bad and people to boo him. People booed Gorgeous George, but he was still so over. And as I said, he still could amateur wrestle. Like, he wasn't a schmuck or anything. He had matches with Billy Watson, Lou Thez, even an up-and-coming star, you might have heard of him, Bruno Sammartino. Funny enough, the legacy of Gorgeous George can be summed up in 3 matches. 2 of them, he got his head shaved. And the 3rd one was after his 2nd head shaving, where he put his wife's hair on the line. and he lost, so she got her head shaved as well. But you figure since those locks of his were his gimmick, it was a big moment in time. Gorgeous George, the last time that he would lose his hair was against the Destroyer, who is one of the more famous masked wrestlers. But Gorgeous George, like I said, the character was so larger than life. You have Muhammad Ali and James Brown both acknowledged their approach to self-promotion to Gorgeous George. Think about that. Muhammad Ali and James Brown giving credit to a pro wrestler that people compared to the likes of Lucille Ball. This puts Gorgeous George on a pedestal that others can only hope to climb to one day. I mean, even Macho Man in the late 90s, his valet, he purchased the name Gorgeous George so that way he'd be able to use it. He had a couple of titles throughout his career, but kind of like The Undertaker with his aura, you don't need titles. Inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2010. Luckily enough, his wife was still alive at the time, so she was able to accept it for him. And I say luckily enough because Gorgeous George unfortunately died in 1963. But Gorgeous George, as I said, probably the first, I'd go on a limb to say the first sports entertainer. Is he focused on a lot in documentaries or anything wrestling by that matter? No. Besides that sliver at the beginning of the old WWE intro, you really don't hear about Gorgeous George and everything that he meant to the industry. Which is why we're here talking about him, and why George and his Georgie pins are PW profiles.